Welcome to Better Sex, where you get the information and inspiration to create and enjoy your best possible sex life. Join your host, sex therapist Jessa Zimmerman, as she brings you expert guests, helpful tips, knowledge, and strategies to improve your intimate relationships. And now, your host, Jessa Zimmerman.
Hey everybody, it's Jessa. Welcome back for another episode of the Better Sex Podcast. I'm so glad you're here with me, and I appreciate you taking the time to spend a little bit learning about sex, or at least about issues that are relevant to sex. You know, at the time of this taping, which is probably months before you're actually listening to this, but what I've been up to recently is developing a brand new guide to talking about sex as a couple. I have had so many people ask me, you know, how do you even start the conversation if you've got concerns about your sex life? And I get how daunting that can be. It's not an easy topic. So I developed this guide that lays out some tips and strategies and even steps for how to address this as a couple and make sure that you're on the same page. So you can find that at sexwithoutstress.com. If you're interested in it, it's right at the top of the page. It's totally free, and I'd be happy to share it with you. So check it out. Let me know what you think. I'd love to hear some feedback, or if you've got more questions, maybe I'll even answer some more, put some more stuff in it if I get some feedback. Today's topic, this is a new one, and it's interesting that it took me so long to get to this topic because it's something that comes up in my work with clients a lot. It's not exactly universal, but it's pretty pervasive. It's a phenomenon that a lot of us experience to one degree or another, and it can be really disruptive. The topic today is jealousy. What in the world do we do with it? It can be so intrusive and can cause so many hard feelings and negative dynamics between a couple, and it's really an issue. And my guest today, Taylor Pierce, is really passionate about helping people with jealousy. It came out of her work with the consensual non-monogamy community, because jealousy is one of the things that rears its head if you have more than one partner, potentially. But the stuff is relevant. These thoughts and the way of framing it, and certainly the steps you take, are relevant no matter what kind of jealousy you're experiencing. Whether it's about additional consensual relationships, whether it's about pornography use by one or both of you, whether it's about past lovers, whatever it is, this conversation is spot on. Hope you get a lot from it. So Taylor, thank you so much for being with me today.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited.
Yeah, I'm really intrigued by this topic, talking about jealousy, because I think it comes up in a lot of different contexts in my work. And I don't hear people talk about it in terms of like a solution or changing how we think about it, or, what do people do? So I'm excited that you're here.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm really excited. I feel similarly that it's not talked about a lot, and there's so much good work to do around jealousy.
So how did you become interested in the topic and working with it?
Yeah, so I first became interested in working with jealousy primarily because of my interest in working with folks who are ethically non-monogamous. I knew both from my personal and professional experience with ethical non-monogamy that jealousy is an issue that can definitely pop up in those relationships.
Right.
And there's very little guidance for working through it in our society. And as I explored this, I also realized jealousy can pop up in any kind of relationship, whether it's monogamous or not, platonic, romantic, work relationship, family relationship. So it feels really important for everybody.
Yeah, it does. It seems like it comes up a lot. And, it's a good point that it's not just about our primary relationship where this could show up, right? We're jealous of coworkers or siblings or whatever.
Absolutely.
So what are the impacts of jealousy? I mean, are there benefits as well as sort of negative impacts to it?
Yeah, it's really interesting you say that, because I do think there's a narrative in our society that maybe we should be jealous because it shows that we care.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I'll get more into that a little bit later of why maybe there's a different way we can show we care. But one way that, or a few ways that jealousy can interfere in a relationship is it can interfere with trust. It can lead to having heightened insecurities and worries or stress in your relationship. And it could potentially lead to control issues in a relationship. So essentially, it feels like if it goes unchecked, it could really threaten relational security.
Okay. Can you say a little bit more about those? I mean, I'm especially intrigued about the control issues. I mean, I think in my mind, I know where you're going with that, but would you elaborate?
Yeah. So sometimes what can happen is if you're feeling jealous in your relationship, you might start to want to create rules or regulations for your partner to follow to kind of keep your jealousy at bay, right? Mm-hmm. So you might say, like, I don't want you hanging out with that person who brings up jealousy for me. I don't want you engaging in this certain behavior, and so on and so forth. And so I think it's really interesting to piece apart, like, what is a boundary in your relationship that feels really healthy and aligns with your values, and what is jealousy kind of taking over and leading to some control issues.
So are you suggesting that saying, hey, I don't want you hanging out with so-and-so is basically a bad idea? I mean, is that not an appropriate solution?
Yeah, I think what it can be sometimes is avoidance, right? That sometimes there might be some deeper fears or insecurities popping up for you. And rather than talking to your partner about that and saying, like, hey, I feel really worried that I might lose you, and that makes me feel really scared, we instead go to, like, I don't want you hanging out with that person, right? So my suggestion is not that we can't have these rules or kind of values in our relationship, but rather that maybe we start with what the deeper emotional thing is that comes up and work through that together. Because that can feel far more connecting than if we just jump to the rules or regulations.
Yeah, I see. Because then we're not really dealing with the core concern.
Exactly.
Right?
Yes.
You could start getting a pretty long list of people that your partner is not allowed to see or things like that, right? Where it doesn't really ease your sense of insecurity.
Absolutely. So my thought is, let's start with what's at the core and then go from there.
Okay. So how do you, think about jealousy or frame it or understand it? And is that different than, sort of the way society at large thinks about it?
Yeah, absolutely. I do feel that society kind of presents jealousy as this big green monster of an emotion. You might have heard that expression before.
Right.
There's this messaging that it's not something we can really work through and that we just have to accept it as part of our relationships. Like I named before, there's even messaging that we should be jealous because it shows that we care.
Mm.
And I've also heard people say things like, well, I'm just a jealous person, which I think
I have too.
Yeah, it's really common. And I think that shows how integrated jealousy can become with one's sense of self. So that's kind of how I see it portrayed in society. And I think the way I frame it is a little bit different. And this really comes from the ethically non-monogamous community. Although, like I said, I think it can be helpful for anybody. So I view jealousy as almost an umbrella term representing many emotional experiences. So for me, there are so many feelings underneath jealousy that feel really important to address. A really helpful way to think of this is by considering primary and secondary emotions, which is language that's used in emotionally focused couples therapy.
Right.
But essentially, primary emotions are your gut reaction, your initial emotions when something happens. These tend to be the most vulnerable emotions. Secondary emotions are the emotions that come next. They're how you react to shift away from the vulnerable emotions.
Okay, so I have talked to clients a lot about anger being a secondary emotion, right?
Yes.
It comes in on top of sadness or fear or shame or hurt or whatever.
Absolutely.
So I guess what you're suggesting is jealousy is also a secondary emotion.
Yes, exactly.
So what could be the primary emotion? You said there's a whole list of emotions that people might be feeling. What are the kinds of things they have going on as a primary emotion?
Yeah. Some of the primary emotions underneath jealousy could include fear, such as fear of losing our partner or friend, fear of failing, fear of not being enough, shame, insecurity, self-doubt, all those kinds of more vulnerable feelings could be underneath jealousy. And I do think maybe a helpful way to explain it could be using an example, if that's okay.
Oh, of course.
So let's say that your partner has developed a close friendship with a coworker, and this relationship starts to make you feel uneasy. You worry that the friendship could develop into something more, and you start to feel pretty jealous.
Mm-hmm.
So you may start questioning your partner. You may even start snooping on their messages with this friend. You may start requesting that they do not even pursue the friendship at all. But let's get really curious about what the primary emotions could be that you were feeling before you became reactive. Maybe you were feeling fear, right? Fear of losing your partner or not being enough for them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a really scary and vulnerable way to be feeling. However, it feels so much more important to address that fear and to let your partner know, like, hey, this is coming up for me and I could really use your support around this,
Mm-hmm.
rather than getting stuck in all those reactive feelings and behaviors.
Is there a difference? How do I put this? Is there a difference when jealousy is, I want to say irrational, not based in reality? It's just your fear.
Mm-hmm.
And when jealousy is a reaction to, there's actually something going on with your partner and this coworker or whatever, like your gut tells you something has started to happen that I need to be concerned about. I don't even quite know what my question is there, but is the jealousy, is the role of that different?
I totally hear that. I think that sometimes jealousy could be an indicator, right? That like something is going on and our intuition is like something's not right. And the fear is probably the same, right?
Right.
Like I have this intuition that something's going on that doesn't feel okay for me. And that makes me feel really scared of losing my relationship, for example. So if we start at the fear, it gives us an opportunity to really check in with our partner and say, like, I'm feeling this fear. Like, is there something going on here that would lead to this coming up for me? Like, what's going on for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it leaves a little bit more slowing down, space for processing what's really going on with in your relationship. Because either way, you want to address it, whether it's maybe like an irrational fear that comes from like a history of abandonment in your past, or something really is going on and that's bringing up the fear. You want to be able to address that in your relationship because you don't want to avoid that really important stuff.
Okay. And so I guess I can see what you're saying, that the fear, if your partner's misleading you about what they're doing, or they really are starting an affair or something like that, it's still going to be important to communicate from the fear place instead of just the jealousy place.
Mm-hmm.
And I can imagine even coming from the jealousy place just gives them, I don't know, more of an opportunity to stonewall or react to your bad reactions, or,
exactly.
It starts to triangulate that emotion instead of deal with what's really happening.
Yeah, then you can get stuck in those really yucky patterns of like, I'm being reactive and then you're being reactive. And we're kind of going back and forth, but not really dealing with what's underneath all of this, which is where you will find connection if it's there, right?
Right. And instead of the argument being about, oh, I snooped on you, and so then we start talking about snooping as opposed to the fear and what actually might be going on.
Absolutely.
Do you want to say anything else about any of the other primary emotions that could be under jealousy?
I think maybe we'll get into some more in the steps. So that feels like a good place to leave it for now.
Okay. All right. So let's talk about those steps. Like, I'm imagining that most of the listeners have felt jealous at some point. I'm sure there are exceptions to that, but probably people can at least imagine, how icky that feels. How do people overcome that and get into a more productive way of dealing with those emotions?
Yeah. So the first thing I want to say is like, it's okay that you're feeling this way. I really encourage you to have self-compassion and gentleness with yourself, right? Because this is a really normal thing to be feeling. Like you said, most of us have at some point in our life, and maybe some of us have more than others, but it comes up for everybody in some way. So just telling yourself like, it's okay, I'm feeling this, and getting really curious about what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
So the first step is to identify the deeper emotions, which is some of what we've already been talking about, right? Jealousy tends to be a reaction to other emotions. So if you're able to identify what your jealousy is reacting to, you'll have a better idea of what you need to feel soothed, to feel supported, and what can really be addressed in your relationship. For example, maybe your jealousy is rooted in a fear of abandonment. It can feel really scary to feel like your partner could leave you. And so it makes sense that jealousy is coming up. But having awareness of these deeper emotions can help you kind of identify, okay, where do we go from here, right? What can help me feel soothed around this fear of abandonment that's coming up?
Mm-hmm.
So if you're struggling to identify these deeper emotions, that's totally okay. I have some questions maybe you could ask yourself to get the ball rolling.
Great.
So the first question is, what am I feeling before the jealousy shows up? So just encouraging yourself to slow down a little bit and try to check in with what came first. What am I feeling jealous about? What kinds of thoughts am I having when I'm jealous? Do these thoughts tend to revolve around a common concern? This is a really great way to try to identify the fear, if fear is coming up for you, because it tends to revolve around kind of the similar concern or theme. And the last question is, if my concerns came true, for example, if my partner chose to leave the relationship, what would that mean to me? So that's also diving deeper into this fear, right? Of like, what would it actually mean to me if the fear came true?
Right.
Another thing I recommend in this step is exploring when these deeper emotions started to show up in your life. Because as we go through life, we bring our past experiences and the feelings that come with them with us. So you may notice that this deeper emotion is one you've carried with you for a long time. And it can be really helpful to unpack when it showed up for you and where it comes from so that you can have more understanding for yourself and what your needs are.
Yeah. And I can imagine people have, either from their childhood, like if this abandonment issue or something like that, or in a past relationship, something has echoed this, right?
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. It tends to be, I found a lot with primary emotions that they tend to be ones that have followed us around for a long time.
Yeah.
So it's really helpful to get curious about that, right? Because there might be some work you want to do around this history that you have in healing that versus allowing that to kind of show up in your relationship.
Yeah. Okay. What's the next step?
The next step is to identify what you need to feel safe. So you've identified the deeper emotions, and now you can begin to consider what you need to soothe them. So let's return to the earlier example I gave of having jealousy come up with your partner's friendship with a coworker.
Mm-hmm.
You've identified that the deeper emotions are fear of loss and fear of not being enough. Maybe you just need some reassurance from your partner that they love you and want to be with you. If this is the case, what are some things that could help you feel reassured? Or maybe you need to do some personal work around your fear of loss or self-esteem. And therapy is an awesome opportunity to explore these issues that have kind of followed you throughout your life, because you can really unpack them in that safe space and you can begin to find healing around them.
Mm-hmm.
So I really encourage in this step, making a list of what you think could help your deeper emotions feel soothed. And try to have a balance between how your partner or partners can support you and how you can support yourself, so that it feels like there's this equity and responsibility around your emotions.
That I'm really glad you said that, because I'm sitting here thinking, I can see where this gets into a control issue pretty quickly. And even if you're not saying, I don't want you to hang out with so-and-so, if the message is you need to soothe my feelings of inadequacy, right? That's its own sort of tyranny. So
Absolutely.
It seems so important to me that the person that's feeling jealous is responsible for some of that work to heal those primary emotions, understand where they came from, and sort of, shore themselves up in some way. Not that our partner has no role, but it can't just be up to them to sort of make us safe.
Absolutely. Especially that if this is a feeling that comes from like our history before we even met our partner, it's great that a relationship can help you feel supported, right? And it's not the partner's responsibility to address all of these things that have come up in your history. Right. So it feels really important to know that like you can totally get support from your partner, and there needs to be some personal accountability there to show yourself that love and care. Like, I deserve to get support around what's coming up for me, and I can do some of that work myself.
Yeah. And again, on the other end of the spectrum, I suppose, is somebody with a partner who is cheating or flirting or sort of flagrantly violating agreements or expectations, right? Where then it seems like the ball's more in their court to, at least consider changing the behavior or deciding if you still want to be in that relationship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
It's Jessa here, just taking a quick break. Thanks for listening. Are you interested in being a guest on the show? I'm always looking for people with expertise to share that could enrich other people's sex lives. And I'm also interested in hearing from people who have transformed their own intimate relationship and would want to share their story with my listeners. So if you've got something to contribute to the discussion and want to see about being featured on an upcoming episode, please visit our website, bettersexpodcast.com, and check out the Be a Guest details. You'll find everything you need there. Okay, is there another step?
Yes. So step 3 is to create self-care rituals. I know you've all probably heard a lot about self-care lately, but I feel like it's for good reason. Self-care is so important to our well-being, and being able to take your well-being into your own hands can feel really empowering. When jealousy comes up, it can feel like it really takes control over us, and self-care is a wonderful way to take back your power, right? To say, like, jealousy, you're taking up too much space here. I want the space to be taken up by my care and love for myself.
Huh. Interesting.
Yeah. So if you're struggling with jealousy, creating a self-care ritual can be really impactful. So let's go back to the earlier example to keep it consistent.
Okay.
So let's say that your partner is hanging out with their coworker friend, and jealousy really comes up for you during those times when they're hanging out. So consider setting aside that very time to dedicate to self-care. This can begin to really shift the time that jealousy takes over to time that is all about nurturing yourself, which can feel really good. So I really recommend making a list of self-care activities. These activities can be anything that's like nurturing, energizing, exciting, gentle, supportive, whatever makes you feel really good about yourself and really connected to your needs.
It strikes me as that along with those feelings of jealousy and the feelings underneath jealousy, are all the thoughts that are driving that. And that if in those moments we choose to entertain those thoughts and run circles around what those, we sort of get on that hamster wheel of, feeding those thoughts, that what you're suggesting is no, let's take that time and use it way more productively, put it into self-care, do things that make us feel really good, and sort of disengage from that thought wheel.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it feels like really important that you really incorporate self-compassion around when you're experiencing jealousy. Because one thing I know is, like, when we shame ourselves for feeling whatever it is that we're feeling, we tend just to feel it more. We get stuck in that shame cycle, right?
Yeah.
So I really encourage, like, rather than being like, oh, I'm having all these anxious thoughts and like I'm crazy and I'm too much, like, we can all get into that space sometimes to say, like, it's okay that I'm feeling this way, and I want to redirect to just taking care of myself right now.
Right. Are there other steps that you want to go over?
That is the last step.
Okay. Actually, I probably should have asked you how many are there before we do.
That's okay. No worries.
So those are the positive steps to try to get underneath jealousy and handle it well. What are the negative ones, or the reactions that can make it unhelpful or get you stuck in a pattern? I mean, you sort of already talked about shaming yourself, lack of compassion.
Yeah, that's one of the biggest ones that I want to keep hitting the hammer there, because shaming yourself for feeling jealous really does get you stuck in jealousy more, right? Yeah. So I really encourage continuing to validate your deeper emotions and have that self-compassion, set up that intention for self-care, knowing that you deserve support around all those feelings that are coming up. Yeah. So that's one of the biggest things that can actually keep jealousy coming up, is if you are shaming yourself for it. So you want to interrupt that pattern.
Okay.
Another reaction to jealousy that can maintain unhelpful patterns could be controlling your partner's behavior or getting angry or critical of your partner. Any of those reactive behaviors that we were kind of talking about earlier can really keep you stuck in jealousy. Like it can feel good in the moment, like, okay, you're not going to hang out with that person, right? I feel so much better. And
Right.
then it's going to come back up again pretty soon, right?
Yeah.
So it's just going to keep you in that cycle of jealousy.
Okay. Anything else?
That's it.
Okay. I mean, this is all reminding me too of a sort of a maxim in therapy that if you can't control your own emotional state, the tendency is to control your environment or the people around you. Right. And I'm imagining how out of control jealousy could feel and that we think we're getting the solution by controlling our partner, but it's not really addressing the problem.
Absolutely. Yeah, that feels really spot on.
Yeah. So before I go to sort of the opposite of jealousy, because I do want to talk about that,
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you have any other thoughts about how jealousy affects sex, sexuality, sexual relationships, because now we're not just talking about jealous of our brother for getting a promotion or something, but.
Right. Yeah. One way that I've seen jealousy come up in sexual relationships a lot is around porn use. So I find that really interesting. So let's say your partner is watching porn and you feel really uneasy and jealous about this.
Right.
You might get stuck in their reactive emotions and behaviors, like criticizing them, forbidding them to use porn, getting angry, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
As we discussed earlier, you can try to identify the deeper emotions. Like maybe you're feeling fear of not being enough to make your partner sexually fulfilled. Or maybe you're worried that porn is taking away from your sexual relationship. And that makes you scared of like losing the relationship as a whole. So those are the vulnerable feelings that we want to bring out as you're noticing, for example, jealousy around porn, right?
Yeah.
And then from there, you can decide like what actually works in our relationship around porn use. Like what are the values that we have and what do we want to create together as kind of like our system of how we're able to engage in porn or not. But I encourage starting there at the root, right?
Right.
Because that feels really important to address, that you just want connection.
Right.
You want to maintain your sexual relationship.
The other place I hear jealousy is about, sometimes people are very jealous of their partner's past sexual experiences.
Yes, absolutely.
So it's not even how they're behaving with a coworker now or the porn they might be watching now. It's about, wow, you've had these other lovers. And that also seems like a really common trap for people.
Yeah, I've heard that a lot, even to the point where sometimes relationships will have a rule of not talking about it, right?
Right.
Because it just brings up so many of those like uncomfortable feelings that we would rather just kind of avoid it altogether.
Right.
So that feels like another really great opportunity to dive in deeper and to figure out like, what are the deeper feelings that are coming up here? And how can we use these deeper feelings to have more sexual connection rather than avoiding them and then feeling this kind of discomfort around our sexual relationship?
So what do you think some of the deeper emotions might be in that situation for people?
Yeah, it feels pretty similar. Like maybe I'm feeling insecure, like I'm afraid that these partners fulfilled you in a way that I can't. And that makes me really scared about our sexual relationship. Like if we can maintain a really good sexual relationship, or if you're going to seek out other partners in the future because I'm not enough, right? So it makes me think of like that self-doubt, insecurity kind of experience that can come up.
Yeah. I'm just remembering a few different couples I've worked with where some of the fear was also, maybe you don't think about sex the same way I do. I've waited to have sex until I got married or until the one or something. And you've had these other kinds of experiences that make me afraid that we're not really on the same page or something like that.
Yeah, that's super interesting to think about. And I'd be really curious then about the meaning making behind that, right? So like, what would it mean to me if we did think about sex differently?
Right.
And how would that impact my understanding of our relationship?
Right. And what's the fear underneath that?
Absolutely.
Like it just seems like layers and layers of exploration.
Yeah. So much diving in.
But I totally get your point that going into those layers of those tender feelings, that's where the connection is. That's where the discovery is.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I really feel that while it's really uncomfortable and it can feel kind of uneasy to dive into those places, that we will feel so much more connected to our partners when we're able to go there together and support each other around those feelings.
Right.
It feels really connecting.
So what about, this is only occurring to me right now, but what advice would you give to the non-jealous partner? Like we're talking to the people that feel the jealousy, but it's not easy to be on the other side of that, to be a partner that feels like, hey, I'm not doing anything wrong. It can be hard to have compassion or patience with somebody that's feeling
Absolutely.
jealousy.
That's an awesome question. I love that. I think that it's helpful to be able to really have compassion and empathy for our partners, no matter what emotions are coming up, because we're always going to have different emotional experiences, right?
Mm-hmm.
If our compassion and empathy is limited to things that we can understand in the same way, then we're going to come up with a lack of compassion a lot, right? So just remembering while I may not experience this, I know a lot of people do. I know this is coming up for my partner. And I know there's probably something that I experience that my partner doesn't. And I really want support around that too, right? So just knowing that it may not always be the same, and that's okay. But seeing if you can really tap into that compassion to say this is hard for me. I get frustrated by this coming up, right? But I also can understand that we have different experiences, and that's okay.
Yeah. And I guess I'm tempted to suggest, that person could also realize, wait, there's some deeper feelings going on for my partner, and they probably feel afraid or insecure. So maybe that'll help me have a more patient stance.
Absolutely. We're far more likely to react with compassion when our partner says something like, I'm scared of losing you, right? Than if they're like, I don't want you talking to that person. We're more likely to react to that. So that's a helpful thing to know is if they're going to that vulnerable place, you're probably going to feel more empathy and compassion for them.
Right. Another thing I tell people, this isn't just about jealousy, but just because your partner feels something doesn't mean you've done something wrong. I think that the non-jealous partner might feel defensive or affronted that they're being accused of something. And instead of realizing, wow, they're just having emotions and thoughts that may or may not be accurate. You don't have to defend yourself against that. There can be room for those, right? And have some curiosity.
Absolutely. I think that's a really useful opportunity to incorporate a both and perspective. So you can both be feeling this fear and worry, and it can be true that I'm not doing anything, right?
Yeah.
And I'm also feeling frustrated or accused.
Right.
And both can be true at the same time. You don't have to get into that back and forth of whose experiences or reality is the most true.
Right. Okay, so can we end by talking about compersion?
Absolutely. So compersion is a term used in the non-monogamous community, and it's to explain a feeling that contrasts jealousy. So compersion is essentially the joy of knowing that someone you love is experiencing something positive and fulfilling. And the good news is that we all feel compersion. It can just be hard to access when vulnerable feelings are in the way. Right?
Okay.
So let's think of some examples that might feel a little bit less charged. Maybe you have a friend who got a job that they really wanted and you feel so happy for them. That's compersion.
Okay.
Or maybe a friend starts a new relationship and you see them beaming with love and happiness, and that makes you feel joy. That's compersion too.
Okay.
Even in your romantic relationship, you've probably experienced it. Maybe your partner accomplished a goal and you feel really excited for them. That's also compersion. So we feel it all the time, and it's a really powerful feeling. And the great news is that compersion is powerful enough to take on jealousy. So I see them as they can kind of battle each other, right?
Okay.
So I really encourage if you can make a list of the times that you felt compersion And maybe it's easier to start with like friends or family members because there might be less of those charged feelings than in your romantic relationship. And then you can start to think about times when you have felt it in your romantic partnerships. Think about how you describe the feeling, what it's like for you when you experience it. And then you can imagine what it would look like to feel compersion in the moments that you feel jealousy, right? So what would it be like to feel compersion for my partner that they have this new friendship at work instead of jealousy?
Yeah, and I can imagine that I can see how you'd have to work through the fear.
Absolutely.
And have that connection with your partner to make room for that or get the jealousy out of the way. Yeah.
If you have done these other steps first, it can feel so much easier to access compersion than if you try to go here right now, right? Yeah. Before you've been able to really address those deeper feelings.
Yeah. Anything I forgot to ask you or any other points you want to make before we wrap up?
I think that's everything. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I would love for you to tell people where they can find you, learn a little bit more about you.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm a therapist at the Center for Couples and Sex Therapy in Portland, Oregon. So you can find my information on that website. It's ccstpdx.com. And you can also email me at taylor@ccstpdx.com. And I believe that will be in the show notes too.
Yes, I will definitely put this stuff in the show notes so people don't have to write while they're driving or something.
Awesome. Perfect.
Well, great. Thank you so much for talking about this with me today.
You're welcome. Thanks so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
You've been listening to Better Sex. Please visit our website, bettersexpodcast.com, for show notes and additional episodes.
And that's a wrap for today. I really hope you enjoyed the episode. If you are enjoying the podcast, if some of this material resonates with you and you would like to make a difference and make sure that this keeps coming out in the world once a week, ongoing, there are a couple things you could do to show your appreciation. The first would be to go to iTunes and rate and review the show. That really helps us be found by new listeners when you review the show on iTunes. You can find a link at bettersexpodcast.com/iTunes. The other thing I want to invite you to consider is becoming a Patreon. For a small monthly pledge, you get some benefits. So for $2 a month, you get advance access to every single episode. For $5 a month, you get a chapter of my upcoming new book. And for $10 a month, I host quarterly get-to-know-you and question-and-answer chats over the web, and you get invited to that. I would love to have your membership in that, become part of the Better Sex family. You can find a link at bettersexpodcast.com/Patreon, which is Patreon. Again, thanks for listening. I'm glad you're here. Feel free to comment, ask questions, get in touch. I'd love to hear from listeners. Thanks.